All right, good evening, everyone. I've got 6:30. I'm Mayor Tome here to call to order this meeting of the Columbus Common Council for a regular meeting. Today is Tuesday, January 19th, 2021. Thank you, Pat. When you're ready, could you please take a roll call for us?
Adams?
Present.
Gray?
Present.
McCabe?
Here.
Pifferone?
Present.
Reed?
Here.
Ryan?
Here.
Tome?
Here. Thank you. If able, please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Right, this meeting has been noticed in accordance with state statutes and local ordinances. Next item is to approve the agenda for the evening. Unless there's any alterations or deletions, I'll take a motion to approve the agenda as presented.
Alder Pfeiffer will make a motion to approve the agenda as noted.
Alder Ryan will second.
Motion from Pfeiffer, second from, Ryan, to approve the agenda as presented. Is there any discussion on the motion? If there's no discussion on the motion, all those in favor, please say aye.
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 Aye. Aye. Aye.
Is anyone opposed? All right, motion passes. Agenda is approved. Thank you. On to correspondence and communications. I don't believe we had anyone signed up for Zoom this evening. Is that correct? Clerk says that no one has signed up on Zoom. We had one citizen in this evening. That's Ron Curtis. Did you want to speak during the committee of the whole? Okay, all right. We have no other citizens present this evening in the council chambers for correspondence and communications. So we'll move on to the consent agenda. Tonight we have the council and committee of the whole minutes for January 5th, 2021. And I don't believe we had any applications for operators licenses. Is that correct, Pat? Okay, no licenses this evening, so just the minutes. Are there any questions on the minutes under the consent agenda? I see no questions. If there are no questions, I'll take a motion to approve the consent agenda.
Alder Ryan will make a...
Adams moves to approve the consent agenda.
Get a motion from Adams, a second from Ryan to approve the consent agenda as presented. Any discussion on the motion? If none, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Aye.
Aye.
Is anyone opposed? Motion passes. Thank you. We'll move on to new business item number 1, to consider and take action on music and memory donation to the senior center. This donation was reviewed at the last committee of the whole with Kim Lang from the senior center. There's a donation in the amount of $2,500 that came from NRPAC community grant and also a combination with the former grant, a $2,500 CAE grant awarded in 2019. And between those two grants, Kim would like to start the Music and Memory program in the amount of $3,800 for training and 15 participant kits. Continuing costs include annual certification and $100 to $400 per additional kit. So Kim is available on Zoom if anyone has questions about the donation. I don't think there were many questions at the last meeting, only support for the program. Did anyone have any questions for Kim this evening? If there are no questions, I'll take a motion to accept the donation for the Music and Memory to the Senior Center.
Alder Gray will move to accept the donation to the Senior Center for the Music and Memory program.
Reed second.
I have a motion and a second to accept the donation to the Senior Center for the Music and Memory program. Is there any discussion on the motion? If there's no discussion, all those in favor, please say aye.
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 Aye. Aye.
Is anyone opposed? All right, motion passes. Thank you. Move on to new business item number 2. Consider and take action developing a downtown tax incremental district. There is a contract in the packet for Ellers to begin the process of creating the TID district for us. As you note in the information, there are 3 different phases. Phase 1 to do the feasibility study and to create the project, and on and on. That will be about a 3-month process to finalize the TIF district. The city attorney has reviewed the contract and has no concerns on the contract. So the action requested of council is to approve the contract with Ellers to work on the project plan for a downtown TID. Are there any questions from council members tonight on the contract with Ellers? All right, if there are no questions, I'll entertain a motion to approve the contract with Ellers to develop a downtown tax incremental district.
Read motions to approve resolution 2-21. Resolution to authorize.
Sorry, that's the wrong agenda.
Wrong item.
Back up.
Oh my goodness.
Number 2.
Would like to approve developing a downtown tax increment district via the Ellers contract.
Alder Gray will second.
Motion from Reed, second from Gray to approve the Ellers contract to develop a downtown tax incremental district. Is there any discussion on that motion? If there's no further discussion, could we please take a roll call, Pat?
Gray,
Aye.
McCabe,
Aye.
Pifferone,
Aye.
Reed,
Aye.
Ryan,
Aye.
Adams.
Aye.
Motion carries.
Thank you. Now we'll move on to item number 3. Consider and take action on resolution 2-21, a resolution to authorize the submission of a community development block grant application for CDBG close application. This is a project that our planning director, Matt Schreiber, has been working on for a very long time, back since June 2019, when we turned over the assets of the old revolving loan fund, and this is being converted into the CDBG program. The application must be submitted by January 31st, 2021, and the city will have 2 years to complete the project. The closed program does not have the matching fund requirements that are required by other CDBG programs, and this past summer the council selected stormwater infrastructure projects along the Second Ward Creek that will mitigate flooding issues in targeted areas. The attached resolution needs council approval as part of the CDBG grant application process. If there's any questions on this resolution, Matt Schreiber is available via Zoom. Are there any questions? I see no questions. If there are no questions, I'll entertain a motion to approve resolution 2-21.
Alder Pifferle will make a motion to approve resolution 2-21.
Alder Ryan, second.
All right, we have a motion, a second, to approve resolution 2-21, a resolution to authorize the submission of a community development block grant application for a CDBG close application. Are there any questions on the motion? If there are no questions, could we please take a roll call, Pat?
McCabe,
Aye.
Pifferone,
Aye.
Reed,
Aye.
Ryan,
Aye.
Adams,
Aye.
Gray.
Aye.
Motion carries.
Thank you. We'll move on to new business item number 4, which is a companion to agenda item number 3. Consider and take action on resolution 3-21, a resolution to adopt the police to prohibit the use of excessive force and barring of entrances or exits for nonviolent civil rights demonstrations for the CDBG close application. This was part of the packet that was submitted by Matt Schreiber at the last meeting, and again, this is a requirement for the CDBG closed program. Are there any questions for Matt on this one? If there are no questions, I'll entertain a motion to approve Resolution 3-21.
Alder Adams moves to approve resolution 3-21.
Gray will second.
We have a motion and a second to approve Resolution 3-21, a resolution to adopt the police to prohibit the use of excessive force and barring of entrances or exits for nonviolent civil rights demonstrations for the CDBG close application. Is there any discussion on the motion? If there's no further discussion, could you please take a roll call, Pat?
Pifferone,
Aye.
Reed,
Aye.
Ryan,
Aye.
Adams,
Aye.
Gray,
Aye.
McCabe.
Aye.
Motion carries.
All right, thank you. Move on to item number 5, consider and take action to change meeting dates due to upcoming elections. As laid out in the memo, the spring primary will be Tuesday, February 16th, and the spring election will be Tuesday, April 6th. Both of the elections fall on council meeting Tuesdays. Typically, these meetings were moved to the Monday before to allow the clerk to attend both the meeting and the election. Are there any concerns from council members about moving those to the Monday, the day before the meeting? All right, if there's no further discussion or no concern there, we would move the meeting to Monday, February 15th and Monday, April 5th. But we would need to take action to do that.
I'll read a motion to move the upcoming meetings to Monday, February 15th and Monday, April 5th of 2021.
Alder Piper will second that.
Got a motion in 2 seconds to approve moving the city council meeting dates to Monday, February 15th and Monday, April 5th. Any discussion on the motion? If there's no further discussion, all those in favor, please say aye.
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 Aye. Aye.
Is anyone opposed? Motion passes. Thank you. Next is the city claims. Consider and take action on claims in the amount of $166,875.30. Are there any questions on the city claims? If there are no questions on the city claims, I'll take a motion to approve the claims in the amount read.
Alder Piper will make a motion to approve the claims in the amount read.
Alder Ryan, second.
We've got a motion in 2 seconds to approve the city claims in the amount of $166,875.30. Is there any discussion on that motion? If there's no further discussion, could you please take a roll call, Pat?
Reed,
Aye.
Ryan,
Aye.
Adams,
Aye.
Gray,
Aye.
McCabe,
Aye.
Pifferone.
Aye.
Motion carries.
All right. Thank you. Claims have been approved. We'll move on to number 7, report of city officers, and I'll turn it over to City Administrator Kyle Ellefson.
Thank you. I have a relatively short report for this evening. A lot of the work is revolving around the agenda items, and that's kind of directing most of our time. Property tax collections are continuing, and I think there's kind of that last wave of the first round of payments for everyone trying to meet the end of the month deadline. That's nearing. We do have about 60% of all the taxes for the year collected already, which is good, and we're at nearly $7 million of total collections. So staff have been busy processing those, and the Dropbox system seems to be working, and anyone with questions still encouraged to call if they're uncertain, and we'll try to help you out however we can. The last item for my report, and probably the most notable, is that after several months without a public works director, today was the first day for the new director. I think everyone's been filling in kind of in the meantime and doing just a little bit more to make sure we were at least holding steady. But I'm excited to have Dave join our team, and he's actually here on the meeting tonight. So Dave, would you like to introduce yourself? There, I will try to unmute him.
There we go. Hey, everybody, how you
Good.
Good. Glad to e-meet you or virtually meet everyone. Look forward to the day when everything gets back to normal and we have normal meetings again, right? Glad to be part of the city team. It was a good first day. Obviously, a lot coming at me all at one time, but you know, I've learned to adapt and I will here. You know, Kyle gave me a month's worth of work. He said he wants it done by the end of the week, so nothing new. You know, hit the ground running. So, but I'm glad to meet everyone. I look forward to working with all of you.
Great. Thanks, Kyle, and welcome, Dave.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thanks again to the DPW staff and crews that have kind of been able to cover things and keep things afloat in the interim as well. So I had one thing I wanted to mention, and today John Namer, the city's wastewater treatment plant manager, announced that he will be retiring after 40 years of employment with the city. John began working for the city part-time in the summer of 1981 for the first 2 years in the street department and then transitioning to the wastewater treatment facility and sewer department. John has served in his current capacity of lead manager of the wastewater treatment plant for over 13 years. On behalf of all of us, I want to thank John for his hard work and dedication to the city over those 40 years. While I can only speak to the past 8 as a city official, I can say with great confidence that John took great pride in his work. I know he appreciated the opportunities to learn and grow, and also the trust placed in him for the responsibilities of managing the wastewater treatment plant. I had the opportunity to visit the plant several times and will always remember how proud John was to show me how things worked and his ability to interpret his institutional knowledge of a very complex system into something that I could easily comprehend and understand. From day-to-day operations and maintenance of the plant, the collection system, the lift stations, to planning capital projects, ensuring efficiency and redundancy for smooth utility operations, it is evident John knows every nook and cranny of the city's sewer system. Over the past decade, the wastewater utility has also faced many decisions concerning imposed phosphorus limits to help clean up at-risk waterways, which include the Crawfish River. While every community that has a wastewater utility has had to make decisions on how to face these challenges, I am especially proud of how John has helped educate myself and other current and past city leaders to proactively address these issues. The city currently has long-term contracts in place for trading water quality credits with upstream and downstream partners, and I know John was an instrumental part of getting the utility on its current path to successful long-term phosphorus reduction. I'm sure that after 40 years, it's difficult for someone like John to feel the obligation to finish, just one more last project, but I hope he finds comfort in knowing his work has left the wastewater utility in great shape. John's plan is to work on-site until next Friday, and then to use accrued vacation in February to travel to exotic locations such as the town of Elba, with his last official day to be March 3rd. Thank you, John Namer, for your service, and enjoy a very well-deserved retirement. That's all I had for the evening. I'll take a motion to adjourn.
Gray moves to adjourn.
Alder Ryan, second.
Have a motion and a second to adjourn. All those in favor, please say aye.
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 Anyone opposed? All right, we'll stand adjourned for a few minutes and return with the committee of the whole meeting minute. The whole committee of the whole meeting. Thank you.
Welcome to the Columbus Common Councils. And the mayor just left. Uh, We're going to pause for the mayor to return. And we'll start. To the Columbus Common Council's Committee of the Whole meeting for Tuesday, January 19th, 2021. Time is now 6:54 p.m. Pat, would you please take the roll call?
Adams,
Present.
Gray,
Present.
McCabe,
Here.
Pifferone,
Present.
Reed,
Here.
Ryan,
Here.
Tome.
Here.
This meeting has been noticed with state statutes and local ordinances. If there are no amendments, I will take a motion to approve the agenda this evening.
Alder Pfeiffer will make a motion to approve the agenda.
Gray will second.
Okay, I have a motion and a second to approve the agenda. All those in favor, please say aye.
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 Any opposed? Okay, agenda's approved. This evening, citizen comments. I didn't have anybody signed up via Zoom. Correct, Pat, thank you. I do have one citizen in person this evening who wishes to speak, but he wishes to speak, as I understand it, on items number 8 and number 9. Is that correct, Ron? All right. So we'll call on Ron during those items. We'll move on from citizen comment then to the department reports. Within our packets this evening, we have department reports for December 2020 from the DPW, the fire, library, the media coordinator, the police, and the treasurer's report. Were there any questions for any of the department reports or comments? Seeing none. Okay, we'll move on to number 6, which is review and discuss the SMA for the TAP grant. And for that, this evening, we have Matt Schreiber. Hi, Matt.
Yes. Can everybody hear me okay?
Yes, I can.
So, in your packet, you'll see the revised memo and the draft SMA agreement for the TAP grant. Really, at the last meeting, the big question was the real estate costs, and we're working through those costs. And since the last meeting, I have spoke with the WISDOT region representative, and he informed me that we should be treating this like a highway project, and at some point we should probably have a consultant, much like we've had for the other highway projects in town, in place to make sure we're meeting all the federal requirements. Obviously, the real estate will not be purchased with federal money, but the TAP grant itself is a federal fund, so that means anything purchased for this project needs to follow the federal rules that are on the WISDOT website. So I just wanted to clarify that. Also, the stewardship grant through DNR is something that we can use to offset those real estate costs, and I believe we mentioned that at the last meeting, and that is something that city engineer Jason Leetman brought to our attention. So that's something that we're going to obviously explore to help offset the real estate costs. So I guess with that, are there any other questions about the SMA?
Not seeing any questions. Mayor Tome?
So is it my understanding then that we don't have to identify the real estate costs in the SMA? We can approve that without knowing those costs?
Correct. When we submitted the application back in, I can't remember when we got the resolution, sometime back in last March of 2019, in that memo, we basically at that time we said that the city would be picking up the real estate costs. So you're right, at this time we don't know it, so that's it won't be in the agreement for that purpose.
Okay, thanks.
Any other questions from council for Matt? Seeing none. I guess, Matt, it looks like you're okay to move it forward then, and hopefully we find out more about the other grant that can help offset those costs. All right. Thank you. Let's see, number 7 is review and discuss the wastewater treatment plant's effluent screen replacement closeout and lien releases. I'm gonna toss this one, I guess, to Kyle this evening.
All right, thank you. So this is sort of a formality at the end of the influence screen project. It's the final payment, but, potentially more importantly, it's, giving the notice that the work is acceptable, and that, kind of closes out the project, and starts some of the other, warranty periods and things like that. The engineer is recommending that we sign this, and that indicated that the work is acceptable from their evaluation. And the city attorney has reviewed a stack of lien releases that they provided from subcontractors and found the ones that were submitted to be in order. Essentially, we're looking for authorization to make the final payment, but also to give notice that the work is acceptable.
Okay. Any questions on anything from council about making that final payment and signing off that the work is acceptable? Not seeing any questions. Okay, then this will move forward to the COW then for the actual final approval.
Correct.
Or, I'm sorry, to the regular meeting. We're in the COW right now.
Yes.
Yes, okay. All right, everybody okay with moving that forward the way it is? Okay, all right. We'll move on then to number 8, which is to review and discuss the timeline and plans for developing a transportation utility. We had a very lengthy discussion at the last committee of the whole meeting. And ultimately at the end, we decided to venture into looking into a transportation utility. So Kyle, I know you laid out just some information here. We kind of went back and forth of which direction we should have number 8 and number 9, but ultimately we have to do this before we do number 9. So please, if we can, to save time, to reserve stormwater fund questions until number 9, if there are any. That makes sense.
I think that makes sense, and we presented these as 2 separate issues. Last time we met, we really talked about them because, at some point it was considered to potentially be an either-or decision, and now the decision's been made to pursue the transportation utility, and at the same time to, take some actions to solidify the stormwater funding. So at this point, I've gone into 2 separate tracks which are related, but separate. So first off, the transportation utility. This is essentially the timeline that staff and the engineering staff have developed that takes us from, today basically through April 5th, when we would hope to have something in front of the city council for consideration to adopt a transportation utility. We think that this is a good combination of a plan that allows different opportunities for the community to learn about it, to ask questions about a transportation utility, and at the same time be providing more and more details as we dedicate more resources to firming up all the details and intricate policies that would go into it. What you don't see on here is every council meeting or every committee of the whole meeting. They're not listed as much independently, but I think it's going to be a recurring item where we say, here's where we are, here's what's coming up, here's what we've accomplished. So those, I think, will be kind of standing meeting items moving forward. But this focuses a lot on some of the major milestones for staff and consultants, as well as some of the major public outreach elements. We can expand this and enhance it and make it more robust, and we can make it more streamlined as well if that's desired. But before we go down this path, I think we wanted consensus that this is the right direction and in the right method and format.
there any questions or comments from the council members about the timeline that Kyle has laid out? For whether it's public information or meetings or just releasing the information at this time?
Just real quick, I have no concerns about the timeline. It looks pretty well put together, and I think it gives us enough time to get this off the ground in a reasonable fashion. So, thank you, Kyle.
Okay. Is everybody okay with this layout and this timeline for the transportation utility? We can go ahead and roll with that. Did you want to speak to this item then, or did you?
I have a couple of questions I would like to ask.
Sure, Ron. I'm going to bring Ron Curtis up to ask some questions.
Okay, thank you. Ron Curtis, 100 Brookside Lane, Columbus. On the transportation utility, something that came up that I just wanted some clarification on that's in here that I maybe misunderstood from the last discussion on this. There's a statement that Rupert and Mulkey will calculate the potential to impact to state aid. And my impression is that part of the process here was to avoid any potential impact. And so what I'm concerned about is whether there is a significant potential impact, that then this again is derailed. And I know there's nothing we can do about it, but that's one of the things that I guess I'm real interested to see that comes out of the discussion. I mean, it's going to be what it's going to be. And the second thing that I was wondering is that there is the direct mailing, and then there's 2 public hearings, and there's a statement made in there that the billing information will be completed in March, which is after both of the public hearings. And so when we're talking to the city residents, I'm expecting that there's going to be some information on what they can expect as far as cost prior to this final billing information being provided. And I guess I'm hopeful that that's the case, and I'm expecting, otherwise it's hard for the citizens to make a comment if they don't know what the cost might be. So, okay, that's all on this one.
Thank you, Ron.
Thank you.
I'm going to let Kyle chime in and hopefully answer some of those questions.
All right, thank you. So we do also have Rupert Milkey online, so they can answer some of the questions or kind of add to what I'm going to jump off with. I'm going to start, I think, at the end. So on February 19th is when we anticipate Rupert Milkey finishing the calculations of the transportation utility. So that's really when we're starting to understand how much money we're trying to raise and then how it's going to be allocated based on the number of parcels and the trip generation criteria. What you see when you look at March 26th, that's all back of the house information. That's all the actual billing information that would allow us to collect it. So that is much more accounting and functional operational information for the city. The actual rates that people could expect are going to be much earlier. So it would be difficult to have a real conversation without some idea of the cost per unit for residential in particular. So that will be out earlier than when the billing information would get kind of put into accounting.
And Kyle, is it correct that you guys would discuss that information then at those public meetings that are scheduled? So that'll be
Correct.
part
I think
of
that would be a component so that people understand the potential cost that they're looking at. That would be one aspect of it. The cost is an aspect, but also, much more on the potential benefits and uses and why it makes sense to use a utility. But yes, you would definitely want to have that as part of your public information meetings. And I'll just jump over and then maybe we'll toss over to Jason Letha after this. I think when we looked at the potential impacts to state aid, if it was a dollar for dollar match in the formula, there'd be some real concerns that, dropping transportation spending in the general fund by $95,000 would lead us to lose $95,000 in state aid. But the way the formula works, that goes into a larger pot of overall expenditures, which includes a variety of things, including some law enforcement expenses get included in that calculation. Additionally, stormwater, when you're considering the stormwater infrastructure that would be related to transportation and eligible, it's not excluded from the formula, it's calculated at a different rate. So, I think it was something like 60% or 65% of stormwater costs that would be related to transportation still can be included in that formula. There would be some loss, but it may be marginal. And we thought, just using some very round numbers, that you would be looking at 5 years, because it's a 5-year average. At the end of 5 years, you could be looking at several $1,000s in lost state aid, but in that same year, you would be gaining over $300,000 in new transportation revenue. So the impact in lost state aid compared to the increase in overall revenue used to fund transportation makes it, I think, beneficial on a grander scale. But Jason, do you have anything to add?
Yeah, Kyle, I think you summed it up pretty well. I believe the percent that Ed had mentioned last time was 17%, potentially as a maximum reduction to state aid based on your current past spending levels. And that would be further lowered by the fact that Kyle had mentioned that capital funding or spending on stormwater would also lower that percentage of lost state aid, but would raise it back up, because the idea here is that we'd be reallocating some of our funds in the general fund to go towards stormwater capital spending. So then that would actually help bolster the state aid back up. It would bring it back up, and so there would be less than that. So again, real back of napkin numbers, and again, when we looked at these initial calculations, keep in mind the amount of funds that we're targeting to raise for the transportation utility is really set by you guys. It's much like the process we've gone through with past assessments, where we've looked at, what kind of a burden are we putting on the public, how much money are we raising, and what can we use those funds for. And so as we get into these calculations, we'll be looking at some recommended target goals, and there might be an iterative process where we go through and we run some of these scenarios for you to determine what you feel the best fit for the residents are versus what the capital expenses raised are. And that will all factor in then to calculating this impact on state aid. So it's not like a set impact where we can say today it's going to be $20,000. We don't know that until we start putting these formulas together and looking at kind of the balance. And so we suspect that there will be a bunch of kind of working with the council, looking at some alternatives, doing some presentations to you guys, try to find what we feel is the best split between raising the funds for transportation, impacting state aid, and also spending capital funds towards the storm utility, or the storm fund that we're talking about. So there's a bunch of moving pieces here, but our goal is to come up with something that minimizes the impact to state aid, but yet increases those costs or funds available for both transportation and long-term for the stormwater utility.
Okay, sorry, Trina, go ahead.
Oh, thank you. Just a question, kind of, I guess, still state aid wise. If the rules for the transportation program wind up being changed, would we be able to cancel our program in a year if it turned out that our tax rates were going to be affected if the rules are changed and we had to find a dollar somewhere for every dollar coming in from this program? It's just the what ifs.
So yeah, I believe with the utility, we would at any time be able to, take actions to, not collect the revenue as a utility. Because it's a 5-year rolling average, the impact of those expenses would have some legacy effect to them. But it's different than the stormwater utility, where every dollar you collect is sort of a dollar for dollar penalty against your levy. This doesn't work like that. Essentially, the money you're spending on transportation, if it's coming from a utility, doesn't count towards your formula. So that's kind of how the impact works. It's not a penalty, it's just that it's ineligible if it's utility funding for transportation expenses, whereas if they were in the general fund, they would be counted. So not really a penalty, just you don't get credit anymore for those expenses.
I think
Thank
Trina,
you. Yes, I understood the benefits of the transportation utility over the stormwater utility, for not having to be, essentially punished. Um, my question was just if the rules are changed to at some point make the transportation utility the same as the stormwater utility.
Yeah.
That was my question for them. We would then be able to cancel anytime if needed.
Yeah, I mean, not knowing what any future legislation might be, they could change the rules, and then we could change our transportation utility after that if it made sense. I think we would have to see what the legislation was, to see if there's a penalty, if we're ahead of the date when the penalty takes effect, as far as, utilities established, prior to this don't apply. I think it's very situational to the legislation.
any other questions at this time? Ron, did you get enough?
Yes.
Okay, for your answers. Mayor Tome, has got his light on?
Jason, Letha, you had mentioned something about, once you start getting into the numbers, looking at recommended target goals, and there's going to have to be a lot of conversation with the council of determining what those target goals are. But I also hope that with the experience you've had with working with other communities of trying to create this type of transportation utility, that also if there's any known flexibility, like, do you have to have your goal down pat the first year when you do it? Do you have any flexibility after you establish the utility? What choice do you have thereafter, I guess, would be good information to know when we get into those conversations. So.
Yeah, we'll definitely take that into consideration. Right now, I think our starting point for everybody is, back when we were doing our land use or our 5-year street plan, we did a pretty extensive review of spending on roads and what was the sweet spot? So how much did the city need to spend annually, to make those improvements matter? And without, spending too much. I mean, you could always spend, $10 million a year, but, obviously Columbus, isn't going to do that. And so I think where we originally looked at the baseline numbers was taking that threshold that was originally allocated and basically doing a cost of adjustment to bring that up to today's dollars. And what happened essentially was that I think that bumped it up in the $600,000 range annually. And so we looked at, what the delta was between what your current level of spending is and what the transportation utility could fund that gap. Now we could certainly lower that number. It doesn't have to be 600,000. But that's one thing where we can look at kind of our past rolling average and come up with kind of a starting point. So that's kind of what I think the logic behind where we're going to start. And I think we'll just kind of work a scenario of numbers for people to kind of see what kind of impacts that level of funding has, and then what kind of impact that level of funding will make on improvements long term to the roadway systems.
Thank you, Jason. Any other questions at this point on this item? Okay. Wonderful. So we're okay with moving forward with that timeline. Then we will move on to number 9, which is review and discuss plans for establishing stormwater fund and reallocating the funds. And that I'm going to toss to Kyle as well.
All right, thank you.
Briefly.
So again, this is the second part of really the solution here that we had talked about 2 weeks ago. As we create a transportation utility, money that would normally be spent in the general fund is then freed up. We talked about making something that was, kind of lasting and permanent and would have a lasting effect and not be a year-over-year decision on whether or not it's funded. And what I put forward here is that we would create a stormwater fund, which would accumulate the revenue and expenses in a clearly segregated fund so that any unspent money would stay within the fund and be available for future years for future improvements. I think the mechanics behind that in 2021 would be that the city council would approve basically a budget amendment. And the first thing in the budget amendment really zeroes out two transportation lines for contracted street maintenance and county aid for street work. Those lines would be brought down to zero, which the total between the two lines is $94,709. That would then be transferred to the new stormwater fund and be allocated there for expenses. I just want to you'll point out that the county aid for street work isn't being abandoned. It's just that would be included in the transportation utility. So we're still taking advantage of the county aid that's available for street work, just coming from a different source. The only other thing I wanted to mention, I guess two things. One is the council could also consider a resolution that established a minimum annual funding amount for the stormwater fund. So you could, sort of ensure that your commitment to the stormwater improvements lasted. And it was very clear to all those in coming years. The second part being that depending on the outcome of the transportation utility, if it's not adopted or it's not adopted in time to collect that $94,709 in 2021, I would not be moving or suggesting moving the money from the general fund to stormwater. So sort of until the transportation expenses we plan for 2021 are replaced by utility revenue, nothing else happens. Once we have enough to make sure, we'll be able to project what we're going to collect. Once the projections are there to say we will collect that, that's kind of the trigger to say, okay, now we will move those funds over. So I do view them as related in that way.
I like the idea of creating a resolution for minimum amount spent every year. I think the big thing we need to do is have a comprehensive study done so that we know what that amount should be, because right now none of us really know how much we should be spending or how much it's going to cost. So I think the big first step in this is, once we allocate those funds to stormwater, is using those funds to create a study, so then we can then move forward with the resolution of a minimum amount per year.
Anybody? Go
Can
ahead.
I just clarify something that Ian said? So when you say a study, that's like studying like what needs the most work in terms of stormwater management, and then just make a ranking list, and then tackle one after the other, and then have a baseline of how much money you'll need each year for those projects. Am I understanding that correctly? Yeah, I agree with that.
Trina Reed.
Yeah, I would like a study at some point. I guess in the first year, I'm not too concerned. I feel like we have enough glaring areas that will need repair. That'll be pretty obvious. Before spending possibly $15,000 on a study to get a list for some projects that are going to take a number of years to get to. But it would be good to have an official list, just not necessarily right away.
Any other comments? Oh, Ian, go ahead.
Just to, my main reason for wanting a study right away is the stormwater. If we do something in one area, we can create bottlenecks in other areas. So many things work together. And even though we can see that this area is obviously an issue, repair somewhere else could alleviate that issue. And we don't know what that would be, and we have no idea the best place to start. We can see things, but what we see isn't necessarily what's causing the issue and where we should start. So I think starting with a study is our best course of action.
I would agree, Ian. Kyle wants to chime in if.
Yeah, just to kind of go backwards to a couple weeks ago, we did talk about one of the issues we have is that we have a list of potential projects, but they lack a certain amount of ranking and, a relationship between what's the most important as well as what the general costs for that actual project in today's dollars might be. So I think the first order probably is some type of study with some type of, level of effort, and we can determine that, I guess, as Rupert Milkie presents a task order. But I think also when we look at the amount of money that you might want to allocate, it's not necessarily saying we have $10 million of improvements and we have 10 years to do it, so it's $1 million a year. I think it's a combination of, just like the road funding, we're not intending to meet that 100% goal. So the funding that we put towards that would be something set as a policy, essentially saying, here's maybe the need, here's what we're going to allocate as far as funding, and some of that might be strategically borrowing to say, here's what we can, put towards it every year, and we're going to do that for 10 years, but do the work early on in the first 3-4 years. But that'll all be policy, and I think the data and the information from the engineers is really the missing component, but I think it'll be an important one to make sure you're using it wisely, and we have a full picture, because I think the systematic thing, the nature of this, if you don't look at the whole system, we are missing out, I think, on, potential bottlenecks and other things. So I think information is needed early on.
Okay. Oh, sorry, go ahead, Mike McCabe, go ahead.
I just wanted to agree with Alder Gray and Kyle. Yeah, I think a study would be the smart way to go at the beginning rather than way down there. That's all.
Okay. So I guess as far in terms of just the resolution, it sounds like we have support. Mayor Tome now has his light on. Go ahead, Mayor Tome.
No, I just wanted to say I appreciate all the comments, and I agree. I think that you have to have a systematic approach to this, as Ian said, and I agree. If you fix one area of a stormwater creek and you're creating a pinch point or a bottleneck, you're solving a problem in one neighborhood and creating one in another neighborhood. So I think that there needs to be a systematic approach when you're creating a stormwater fund or utility. And I also think that there's a lot of information that can be collected to kind of help us determine on what level of a study we need to do. Virtually every road project we've done in the last 8 years I've been here has involved stormwater investments, and I believe that the project in 2013 at the Gateway also affected, the potential creation of a stormwater utility because there was $130,000 spent that year. I just think it's such an invisible utility that's just kind of been included in a project, and you don't realize that you are spending some money on it, but that can help us at least see what have we borrowed for in the last 10 years concerning stormwater, and what have we not put in our general fund budget for annual expenditures. That'll get us a lot of information that we just haven't really set aside as separate expense, and then move ahead and determine what type of more intense study I guess we need of the entire stormwater system. But good comments anyway. Thank you.
I would agree. So for the overall resolution, it sounds like we have support then to move that format into for the regular meeting and move forward with that. So that's exciting. Thank you guys for your comments. Paul Piferone. And sorry, Ron. Ron would like to chime in again. Ron Curtis here. Mm-hmm.
This is Ron Curtis again. On number 9, the Stormwater Fund, I had just a couple of comments or concerns there. And you've already addressed those to a large degree, and that one of my interests was ensuring that there was some sort of a list of projects and priorities set so that you could say, well, this is the most important, and start there and go on. I agree that we don't want to deal with one problem without taking into consideration what would happen with regards to other. What I would like to see is somewhat of a transparent process in that I think the citizens, or at least myself, I would like to know once this ranking is done. And as this CDBG grant application process came up. I looked into that a little bit more, and I have some understanding now that the city did look at some projects. They didn't necessarily prioritize them. It seems that what they did with the grant application was to look at what the criteria was and find which projects would meet that criteria, which is fine. The concern I have is if that grant is turned down, we don't automatically say, okay, we identified these projects, let's go ahead with those. And specifically, the downstream portion, or from Farnham Street down to the river on Second Ward Creek, is identified in there at a very, very expensive project. And what would concern me then is that the project that I'm here interested in, the Parkview subdivision, would be put off for 2 years, 3 years, 4 years. And I don't know how that compares as far as the impacts for the projects that are currently being proposed, the downstream portion of Second Ward versus the area that we're in. So I would like to be able to see that information, weigh one thing against another, and make sure we're dealing with things that involve property damage or whatever else might be involved, and we're weighing those kinds of things. So as far as the resolution, I think I like the approach that you're talking about as far as making sure that there's a commitment, and perhaps this identifying and prioritizing projects can be part of it too. I don't know. There's information put out on the road projects that are being done in the city. I think we can do the same thing with the stormwater projects that eventually come out of this whole process. So that's what I would like to see. Thank you.
Thank you again, Ron. Okay, so it sounds like we're going to go ahead and move forward with that. And we can move on then to number 10, which, I'm gonna set a timer here. No. So ironically, I mentioned to Kyle, the number 10 is discuss city council meeting expectations. So essentially, how our meetings are conducted. It's been brought to the attention of Kyle, and obviously, all of us understand that a lot of our meetings run and last nearly 5 hours, and very late into the evening at around 11 or sometimes later. There's been council members that have expressed concerns about the effectiveness of these meetings and if they are producing the results that the council desires. So basically, the city council can largely determine, it says, how we choose to organize these meetings and operate. So there are a lot of ideas out there about how we can make the meetings more effective and efficient. And we could, if we chose to, limit the length of time on any single item, or these are just suggestions or things we could do. Establish meeting curfews where no additional items can be discussed once a certain time has passed, or establish a limit of the number of items that an agenda can contain, or also just have additional meetings where you would have hopefully shorter agendas in general. This was brought up by a council member who had some concerns, and I agreed to have it here on the COW for discussion. I feel as though I shouldn't be, I guess, inserting a whole lot of opinion in here just because I'm only going to be on the council until April. So I'd really like to hear from other council members and how you feel about these suggestions, or not even suggestions, just options. Does anybody want to chime in? I see Pete Adams. Go ahead.
Okay, so I think I kind of understand, the late nights when we get into it. I would be in favor of having a curfew where we set a time, and then after that, if the items that we do not get to, we can have a, lack of a better term, a catch-up meeting. We can schedule that for the following week, or if it turns out that the next agenda, I don't know how, I can't see it, getting the agendas made up works. But if we know, anticipate that there's gonna be a light agenda for the next one, maybe put it on there. But either way, a curfew and then either makeup meeting or putting it on the next agenda. That would be my view, because I don't really want to cut anybody off if we're having a robust discussion on an item. I'd rather see that continue, and then, at some point we have to, like we did the last meeting, we'll get to a point where we get a consensus and then we can move on from there. But that's my own 2 cents.
Thank you, Pete. I think the only concern I would have with some of these things, it would be, so we are conducting city business here, and how do you prioritize that list of agenda items to what gets kicked off and what doesn't? But overall, I mean, I think sometimes when you're getting late into the evenings, 11 o'clock or later, it can be very hard to make difficult decisions. Another option that's not on here is also just we could limit the amount of time council members would speak or deliberate on certain items. You could, obviously you read your packet ahead of time. The chair could call on each member for input, and you give your input on that particular item and essentially find out if you have a consensus or not, so it's not as much back and forth. But just throwing out suggestions here. Ian Gray, go ahead.
I understand the ideas behind a lot of this, and none of us want meetings to go longer than they do, and none of us want to be in a meeting until 11 o'clock or midnight, like does happen on occasion. But I don't know if strict limits is the right way to go. We could perhaps have a suggested curfew and then have to vote on whether or not we adjourn and table the rest of the agenda items or go past the curfew and keep going. But I think strict time limits and a strict cutoff it could prevent us from conducting city business.
Alder Piper on.
I don't think that we should put a limit on any individual item on the agenda, because that will stifle, creativity and progress and discussion, and then we might be forced to rush into a decision that might not be in the best interest of the citizens. At the same time, I do agree or somehow have a policy that could limit the closing time of it, and I believe, if I'm not mistaken, that we, in a sense, already have that authority, and and if I'm wrong, let me know, but under section 2.36 in the municipal code, adjournment, any council member may move to adjourn a meeting if any agenda item is not considered before a motion to adjourn is adopted. It shall automatically be referred to the council's next regular meeting unless the motion provides for a specific date and hour. So I think, like that underutilized ordinance right there could get us out of, some pickles where we're 4.5, 5 hours approaching that. Therefore, we're not really stifling any individual topic. We're not setting a time limit per se, because tonight's, I'm sure, is not going to go to 11, so there's really no need of that.
Careful there, Paul. No.
Careful, we're far. But so I think there is an underutilized municipal code out there that we, if we want to, we could probably employ that.
Thank you. Thank you, Paul Piper. Mike McCabe, did you have your hand up?
Yeah, I'm sorry. I only caught about half of what Paul just said, but I think I got the gist of what he was saying. But I guess I kind of like what Peter was saying about having, if a meeting is running late, we could stop it and have a special meeting for special agendas that might pop up. Not every meeting we have is long, but with COVID and everything, it's kind of allowing them. But also, I just want to throw out there the possibility, and I don't know how the rest of the council feels about maybe moving the start time up to 6 rather than 6:30. It might not work for everybody's schedule. I don't know. I'm just throwing it out there as a suggestion.
Alder Reed.
Well, I suppose for myself, I found the meetings to be shortened nicely in the past year. But I guess I really don't want to wind up making poor decisions as a group due to an arbitrary cutoff time. I would be fine with something like the idea of maybe at a half hour on certain issues, just being made aware of the time spent on that issue. If we want to continue discussing or tabling it, just to have that awareness of time so that we're not getting lost. I like the idea of a suggested curfew of 10. That's not a hard line, but just a line of it's 10. Would we like to continue? Would we like to put it on to another agenda or a special meeting? But I really don't like the idea of adding a ton of special meetings, especially if we just need to talk an extra 10 minutes, as it might turn out.
Alder Pryforone, did you, your light is on, I just.
Oh, I'm sorry.
No, that's okay. Alder Adams.
First to Alder McCabe, I don't know how everybody else goes, I'm good with 6 o'clock start time. Excuse me for 1 second. After that, piggybacking off what Trina said and Ian said, as far as having, say we start at 6:30, again, the 10 o'clock time comes around. I think at that point, we can kind of see what we have in the agenda items remaining and how the discussions have been going. And then we can just kind of do like a check-in, say, okay, is it worthwhile to keep going for another 5 agenda items? And then we can kind of see about tabling some stuff. And then I think the issue that we're going to have is we need to have some sort of mechanism, like, are we going to put it on the next agenda or do we schedule another meeting? I think if that's the direction we go, that's the thing that we have to think about at that point. But after that, I agree with Trina and Ian on that one.
Alder Gray.
Yeah, I would just like to go back to what Katie mentioned in the beginning, is soon we will have new members on council. And I don't think we should make any strict decisions right now because that is only a couple months away. So changing the start time of the meetings or creating a curfew, I don't think it's something appropriate for this council to decide just before a newly elected council is going to be coming in. I realize that myself and many of us will still be here, but not all of us will be. So for me, I think it'd be best to make any finite decisions after the new council takes. But basically, I think Trina and I are on the same page with that, and it's maybe we could create something where the council president and or in the COW or the mayor in the regular meeting, if an item goes past 30 minutes, they remind us that it's going past then, and we decide whether or not we want to continue. But I don't think we should take any action or create any curfews or change any times at this time.
Alder McCabe.
Yeah, we might not need to make any hard choices, but I think some guidelines set up for the next council that comes in would be good for them, personally. I don't think it would be bad for them to have something to look at, some guidelines to go by.
Mayor Tome.
I'm not trying to influence, the council to go one way or the other. This is not the first time this issue's come up. We have had certain spells where we've had very, very long meetings, and I think people get frustrated, when you're trying to get through an item or have to go into closed session at the end of the evening after 5 hours, I think everyone's kind of struggling to stay awake, stay alert, and make sure that we're all thinking clearly. I think one of the overlying concerns, I guess, regardless of who's on the council, is that if you want people to get involved and they see the council having 4 or 5 hour meetings on a weeknight, that they have an excuse not to get involved because they have to get up early for work. This is a part-time job, and to be able to fit it in, you want to do your best when you're here, and you don't want to rush deliberation in any form either. I do think that probably the most flexibility that could be offered is that if you simply did a time estimate on the agenda to give 20 minutes per item or whatever it is, and when you start falling behind that evening, the council can look at that kind of as a signal to say, we're starting to fall behind now. If we are going to continue down this path, then you can at least look at the agenda to determine which items could be tabled to the next meeting and which ones cannot be tabled. I think having just that strict time to say, if we're not done by 10 o'clock, we're done. If you have 3 items and you have to make a decision at that meeting, you can't table them. You're falling behind on city business. And so I think having some flexibility, but still having the guidelines out there will help you kind of get through the meeting in a more efficient manner to know if you're falling behind or if you're ahead of schedule. That's just my suggestion because it seems to give ultimate flexibility to the council to recognize where they are and and whether they can get through the entire agenda that evening or if they have to start making decisions on which items to consider tabling and to prevent additional meetings, because I know that that's difficult at times to have a patch of special meetings, and I think there is a call for special meetings sometimes, but maybe they're just larger conversations we know we can't get through amongst the committee of the whole agenda. So that's my 2 cents anyway.
I'm not also trying to influence council one way or the other either. So, but I do think some more structure would be helpful. I think the thing that, we have to be respectful of each other's time. Obviously, we're all serving in the same capacity, and it's challenging, and it requires a certain time commitment. And I think, a lot of times that we've been here until late in the night, we've gotten a lot of things done, a lot of good things. So, but it's structure is good. I like Mayor Tome's idea of just kind of assigning a timeline to each item and then just figuring out what items you would be able to table potentially. But if the rest of the council doesn't want to change anything or have any guidelines in place, what are the thoughts? Ian, go ahead.
I mean, honestly, that I don't think needs to be a policy change or anything. I think that's more on the city staff, the president, and the mayor. When you create the agenda, saying this one should take approximately 20 minutes. This should take. That's just more back end work on preparing each individual meeting. Mm-hmm. I don't think there's any need to create any sort of specific structure or strict time on anything. Just putting in, it should get here, and then if it's a regular meeting, the mayor could remind us that we're going past and make a suggestion of maybe tabling a couple things or ask for a vote to continue through without tabling. And the same with if it's a cow, the council president would do that. I don't think there's any need for any strict changes. That's more of a back end of the staff and president and mayor creating that timeline, and that would vary slightly meeting to meeting.
Sure, I think, but I do think it was important to have this discussion with council to get the input of the actual council members instead of me just being the chair and said, okay, you're done talking and we're moving on. I certainly could do that, but I think that we should have this conversation. It doesn't have to be a strict policy, but I think if, just getting the input from the council members because they're the ones serving and devoting their time to this, that I figured we should have this conversation. Trina Reed.
I guess I, don't like the idea of having, 10 minutes by one discussion item and 20 minutes by another. It's really hard to say sometimes which ones wind up needing more hammering out. And as far as, the idea of limiting what would go on the agenda by number, I wouldn't want to do that either because certain things, I have more of a time need and also, a time need on the calendar. And also because, we might have, 15 things that take 10 minutes that are very simple.
Alder Pfeifferon.
To piggyback off of Mayor Tome's idea, or sort of, I guess, is if there's let's say, 4 items that are time sensitive and they must be dealt with that night, and they cannot even possibly be thought of being tabled, maybe again, bat scenes, put those at the beginning of the agenda where those are tackled, and if for some reason the items after that, it's relate and they are able to be tabled, then we can table them, but get the meat and potatoes out of the way that cannot be put off to another meeting.
I don't disagree with you, Paul, and I think over the years we tried to refine the order of the agenda to kind of group things together. One of the things that we consider is if there's a staff member that only has, one item, rather than having them being paid to be at a meeting for 3 hours, if we can kind of take them, get through the agenda item, and they can go home, they're done for the evening, and try to kind of figure out the structure of the agenda for that way. Like if Matt's got 3 items, he'll kind of be in this area. So we do try to consider that for efficiency. I think I agree. If there are things that have an expiration date on them and you have to deal with them, I think the last ditch effort is if something is not discussed at the committee of the whole, it can't be forwarded to the regular meeting. If something had to be decided at the regular meeting, accepting a donation is probably pretty simple to get through at a regular meeting, but creating a transportation utility fund is not something that you want to end up at the regular meeting, or you'll have a 3-hour regular meeting. So I think the intent here is just to, if you have a rough guideline to go by, then when you are, when it's getting too late, and when someone can speak up and say, hey, I feel like, I'd like to be done by 10 o'clock tonight because I have to get up for work at 4 o'clock in the morning and it's 9:30, you can at least start looking at which agenda items could be tabled that don't have time. If you're talking about like in a topic like this that could be discussed in 2 weeks, you can table it, that there's no threat of losing anything by tabling that. So it's just something to inspire the council to maybe look at that, to see how efficient you're being in how efficient the conversation is going, because it is very hard to predict when we're laying out the agenda. Kyle and I can't really read minds, and you can't predict all the time how quickly or how slowly things will go once you start digging into the materials. So if I knew how to do that, I would have done it. But I think just having a rough guideline I don't think having a rough guideline is holding the council to any standard to say you always have to do this, but it inspires that conversation to recognize and take action as a body at that time.
Alder McCabe. Oh, sorry.
I'm sorry.
Did you want to
Yeah, I
continue,
just wanted to-
Pfeifferon? Hold on, McCabe, sorry.
I won't pretend to know what it entails to put stuff on the agenda, but, and I know that I've seen it in the past where can we readjust the agenda and, because we got Matt, and then Matt's 3 items away. So I've seen that happen, but just trying to come up with different brainstorms. And apparently it's not a new one because you've done it before, so.
Okay, sorry. Alder McCabe, you may go ahead.
No, I liked what Mayor Tome was saying. I think even if it's a rough guideline, anything would help the new alders coming in to know what's expected of them a little bit more, and have an idea of what's going on. And it would help streamline, I think, a little bit. Just to have, even if it's a rough guideline, anything would be helpful, I
I'm okay with a rough outline, and at least if we, if we can chime in and say, hey, we've hit our time limit here, focus on either whether we have a consensus or not, or do we need to table this? And I think it just kind of inspires that conversation to kind of, if we've wandered off, get a little bit back on track and figure out what we need to do. Alder Adams, did you want to chime in?
You kind of took the words out of my mouth there. I was going to say exactly the same thing, so.
Okay. Mayor Tome?
How about just as an experiment, maybe for the next agenda, when Kyle and I are talking about the agenda and we look at, the number of agenda items we have, I'll do my best to kind of estimate, generally the first meeting is a half an hour to 45 minutes. Sometimes it can go a little bit longer, but just take the number of agenda items we have and say, okay, we'd like to be done by 10 o'clock and just divide, those 10 agenda items and say, okay, there's this many minutes per agenda item, and just lay it out on the agenda just kind of as a tracker. We may be way off, and we may finish up in half the time, but if we do run into an area where it's 9:30 and we've got 3 agenda items left, that at least we're cognizant of that, just as an experiment.
I'm okay with that. How does council feel about the experiment? Everybody good? Okay.
Gives flexibility to everyone, and I think it will kind of help maybe the next council as well coming in just with that approach to say, okay, well, we don't like this and we need more time or we want less time, but sometimes it's just hard to predict that. But I think if we just have a real rough guideline and a target, that the conversation can happen at that meeting and the council can make the decision at that time.
Yeah. Okay.
Great, thank you.
All right, thank you, guys. The next item is to adjourn. I'll take a motion to adjourn.
Alder Gray moves to adjourn.
I'll second.
All right, I've got a motion and a second to adjourn. All those in favor, please say aye.
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 Anybody opposed? We stand adjourned.
Have a good weekend,
Thanks.